Welcome everyone to a Good Vibes gaming discussion, one we've been wanting to do for a while, but schedules are a little wonky, and hey, we finally got a chance to get together outside of, the normal stuff we have to do, because dang it, we need to talk about Metroid Dread. And just off the cusp, I already have my review out there. I'm pretty sure all these guys love it just as much. This is probably going to be spoiler filled from the outset, or mostly the outset. So, yeah, spoilers beware, but I am joined this time by my good friends and GVG co-founders Steve Bowling and Ash Paulson, along with our art director, Daniel Evernight. I don't actually know your last name, I just thought of, and I don't know if we ever give it, but Evernight, Daniel, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Daniel Alba, if you want to keep that in for the future. I know.
You probably know his big sister, Jessica.
Not yet.
Oh, it's actually my cousin.
Oh, of course.
Not my sister.
I just call him Daniel Evernight, Nighttide, Man of 100 Names, Alba. That's just kind of become my working name for network. Yeah.
I feel so bad for everyone that's trying to commission me. They don't know how to reach me anymore because I have like 40 names.
Yeah.
He has as many names as Samus has things inside her body.
That's one way of wording it. That's for sure.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, you guys are the worst. Anyway, yeah. Corrupting everything I say.
Oh, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. Echoes of games long past,
yeah.
You might say.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm primed for this discussion if you guys are ready.
Nice. I love it. I love where this is going.
Yeah, I'm super, so let's do it.
So, Metroid Dread is a thing that happened, and we've all finished it. I as Derrick said, your review is out there. Everyone knows how you feel about it. But this is going to be a spoiler-heavy discussion. We're calling it a spoiler discussion. So, if you haven't finished Metroid Dread and you care about spoilers, back out now, because we're going into it. We're going story, final boss, power-ups, everything. Everything's on the table. So this is your official warning to get out now. If you have not finished the game yet and you're worried about spoilers.
All right. Well, so what'd you think, Ash?
Well, sure. Okay, then. You know what's funny? I was the lone holdout for the longest time. You guys finished before me, I think, by probably a couple of weeks or so. And you were all saying pure bliss. And throughout most of the game, I was still on a great vibes. But what finally pushed it over the edge for me was the whole in-game sequence, the final boss battle, that fight itself. It's such an incredibly well-designed fight. The plot revelations that I did not see coming, just the whole end game, the whole end sequence, that pushed it into a pure bliss for me. So I was the lone holdout for a while, but that did it for me. Pure bliss. What a game, man. I'm not ready to say it's my favorite 2D Metroid, but it's a contender. It's a contender for sure.
What about you, Steve?
Oh, man. I think I might have been the first one of us to beat Metroid, which is crazy.
I think you were.
But I ended up beating it over the course of 2 nights. Like, I just couldn't put it down. I came in at about 7.5 hours, and I think it was the same way for me, Ash, when I played the game, up until probably the last, let's just say last 10% of the game. It was sitting very comfortably at a great vibes for me. It's a fantastic game, mechanically. Like it like most Nintendo games, it controls extremely well. But even within like the small pantheon of Nintendo games, Metroid Dread kind of stands apart in how well it actually controls and feels to play. But that alone isn't enough for me to put a game at like a pure bliss rating, right? Like that's a really hard thing for me to assign to a game. But the way they handle Samus's story and how much they flesh out her backstory in that last like 5 to 10% of the game, oh my god, it throws it so far over the top for me. It's ridiculous. Like you find out so much about Samus as a character, and there's so many cool, like really badass fan service moments in that end portion of the game that it just put it way over the top for me. I'm with you in that I'm not sure that it's my favorite Metroid game of all time, just because of the fact that I have so many years of love for Super Metroid in my past that it is really hard for me to separate like the deep love that I have for that game over the decades that I've played it over and over again. But the fact that Metroid Dread can even exist within that same space in my mind, that's a question that exists, speaks to just how incredible of a game it is to me.
Well said.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, this game, like from the beginning, like as you take control of Samus, you realize how well she controls, how tightly she moves within her environment, and how much she like kind of just adapts. Like as you move around, her movements are so like naturally, organically keyed into how she's moving and traversing through the environment. Like there's like a little opening and she's holding her hand on it while she's like pointing through, and you can still shoot through. Like so many little moments like that where she can like interact with the environment. It kind of all interconnects with this whole world. And yeah, this game was definitely towards the end. That's when I knew like this would have been a pure bliss for me, because just the sheer amount of effort that went into like designing like not just the world itself, but also the narrative that they kind of just gently feed you throughout. Like it's not too overblown with narrative, maybe a bit at the beginning when they're trying to do the entire setup. But as you go through, you realize like, wow, this is a game that definitely took all the like 16 or so years to make it. It's finally culminated into this one game that really exceeded a lot of people's expectations, in my opinion. And it's interesting because Metroid Prime was my first Metroid game. I got into gaming really hard when the N64 was there, and obviously the only Samus we got on the N64 was literally Super Smash Brothers. And so I didn't get into the older titles like Super Metroid until like the Wii Virtual Console, and then like further on with like Game Boy Zero Mission, Game Boy Advance's Zero Mission. I didn't even get into that until like within the last couple of years, so that was a really recent thing. So in my opinion, like as far as how Samus controls, how the game plays and controls and the pacing and everything, this might be my favorite Metroid game, like a 2D Metroid game. I still might hold like the overall Metroid game as within the Prime series, just because I kind of nostalgia for that. But this game does everything so well within its context, and I can't imagine like our world now without this Metroid game, because it's so well done for its defining the genre of Metroidvania. I think this really nails it and like gives it makes it worthy of that title.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I have said my piece, but I will say, I think even if it had not provided all those amazing moments in the finale, I still would have landed on a pure bliss once I tried out hard mode, or even just replay it, because, you're starting out the game, you're still getting the systems in place, you're still figuring out how the movement works, and you're not, you're pretty new at it. You're not going to be great. But I did get a chance. I didn't finish a playthrough of hard mode, but I did restart and play some. And seeing my new skills that I built up over the course of the entire game click and just tear through everything, even on this more difficult mode, felt so sublime. It was truly satisfying to play. And I think that's the major takeaway here. This is the best controlling Metroid I've ever played, and that gives it a big up for me. But then it also has the moments, and I don't know. I wasn't there at the time when Super Metroid comes out, so I don't know if what happens in the finale matches to the end of Super Metroid, when you see the baby Metroid attack Samus, and you're like, "Oh crap! It actually recognized me, and it leaves me alone." That's close. That's crazy. What happened to the baby Metroid? And then it comes in and saves you at the end against Mother Brain. Two very iconic moments for that game that really make them stand out for everybody. But I think that battle against Ravenbeak is full of great moments and just a better boss fight overall. And I think that's another key thing. The boss fights here are way better than Super Metroid, or most Metroid games, I'd say. They feel like before, I don't feel like I could dodge most of the attacks. I was like, all right, I'm going to have to eat some of these attacks if I'm going to get through it. I know there's some expert players out there that could definitely do it without any issue. But for a layman like me to be able to feel like I could pull that off, I think that speaks highly to just how well Metroid Dread controls. And they built bosses around it to really emphasize that, especially with the expanded counters and whatnot. And it just all comes together into this package that takes the best of all the Metroids and creates what very well could be the best Metroid game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see the argument. I mean, I definitely agree that Metroid Dread is the best best controlling 2D Metroid game, period. There's no question in my mind that Metroid Dread has the best movement for Samus, the best controls, the best contextual abilities for the environment Samus is in. I love it, and to me, the perfect Metroid game may indeed be a theoretical remake of Super Metroid that with the Metroid Dread engine that controls like Metroid Dread. Obviously, it would have to be tweaked to accommodate Super Metroid's specific power-ups that are different from Dread's. But I like, as much as I love Super Metroid, going from Dread's controls back to the way Samus controls in Super Metroid. That'd be tough. Not that the controls in Super Metroid are bad. It's one of the greatest games of all time, but she's just so smooth here. She feels so good to control. And like you said, Derrick, the boss fights are designed so well around what she can do. That Ravenbeak boss fight was one of the most exhilarating final boss fights I think I've experienced in quite a while. And it's because it's tough, but it's fair. And it takes cues from, I mean, we were talking about how I'd probably enjoy the final boss because it's all pattern recognition. It takes its cues from the very best Mega Man style of bosses, where it seems like you're up against these impossible odds. But once you take a step back and you start learning the tells and you start learning what Ravenbeak is going to do, and you can play around that, you can start playing it so cleanly, and you can feel yourself getting better and see yourself improving. And by the time I did I think I beat him on my 4th try, I think it was. Maybe it was either my 4th or 5th, I can't remember. But by the time I beat him, I was barely taking any damage in the first 2 phases. Like, barely at all. And then once I figured out you could powerbomb the sun attack in the final phase, that was it. Well, once I figured that out, I was like, oh, this is easy.
I don't think I've
Oh, yeah,
that.
no. So I tried that. I died. The one time I died against, I think either one of 2 times I died against the final phase of Ravenbeak. It was because of that damn sun attack, and it makes you feel like you're playing Flappy Bird almost with the way you have to space jump in between all the sun waves. But I was like, you know what? You can destroy the black hole attack. So and the sun, when you shoot it, it looks like it takes damage. So I'm like, maybe it just has a lot of HP. Let's try a power bomb. Yeah, power bombs take out that thing immediately, and it makes the final phase of Ravenbeak almost a joke. Not completely a joke, but almost a joke. And once I figured that out, and figured out how to avoid all of his attacks and saw that coming, it's the kind of fight that really makes you feel rewarded for putting in the work to learn the patterns. And of course, it's also full of badass moments, right? Like, Ravenbeak bringing out his wings, and then later, like, you know what? Fuck wings. Who needs wings? I'm going to take you out on my own terms. Rips off the one remaining wing he still has. What a cool fight. And it's like, man, the plot twist in terms of the actual identity of Ravenbeak. Like, I will say, I had the broad strokes of Metroid Dread's story figured out pretty early on. I didn't know who was responsible. I didn't know if it was the Galactic Federation or if it was, Evil Chozo. But I was like, someone's luring Samus out to planet ZDR and using the Emmy to extract her DNA because she has Metroid DNA to raise a new army of Metroids or something like that. I had that much figured out. What I did not have figured out was that Ravenbeak was Samus's actual DNA father. What? That was awesome to have that just last minute plot twist thrown at you, like, my daughter. And I'm like, oh shit, we're all Star Wars up in here now. This was so cool. And that I didn't see coming at all. And I certainly didn't see her becoming a Metroid coming. Like, the whole Metroid suit, it made sense. Well, like, the whole game I was like, oh, what's going on when her eyes get all freaky and what's going on. And it made sense when you get that initial explanation from Adam that the Metroid DNA in her has been activated. Okay, cool. But then when you find out that she's actually becoming a Metroid, man, I didn't see that coming, and it was so cool.
I would say, I'm curious about what Steven and Daniel think, but I would say a bigger plot twist to me, rather than the whole DNA father revelation, was that it was Ravenbeak the whole time speaking.
Oh, true.
Adam,
that too.
what you thought was Adam. That was huge to me, because all of a sudden, like, I replay it, it's like, it says it calls her Samus, not Lady,
right.
And it's like, that's the clue,
right?
And it's like, oh my God, they actually made that mean something. That when they can sneak that sort of thing in there for a plot twist, and rather than just like, hey, I was here all along. that's a bigger plot twist to me personally. But what about you? And what about you, Steve?
Yeah, so I would agree that the revelation that Ravenbeak was guiding you along, posing as Adam, was a way bigger shock to me, just because I didn't pick up on it. Like, I was like, oh, we reconnected Adam right at the beginning of the game, right?
Yeah.
He tells you, oh, I can't reach you down here, find a terminal to reconnect me. And I was like, and then I started thinking back on all the stuff he was telling her, like, oh, you're currently not strong enough to take on Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak will kill you. Your only hope is to escape. And I'm like, yeah, that definitely sounds like stuff the bad guy would say. Like that. In hindsight, that absolutely sounds like
you can't win. I'm too awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But I do agree. It is kind of a minimal difference to me, because I was definitely shocked when we found out that Ravenbeak was involved with Samus's upbringing, that his DNA is in her, and that to me was, I mean, we find out like Samus is essentially like the main character of Bleach. Like, she's every single possible race that has been encountered in this game at this point. She's got the X parasite. she's got Metroid DNA. She's part Chozo. She looks like a human. Towards the end of it, and of course, we get there, but I was like, why didn't Samus just look like an ungodly monster at this point? Like, how many different things is she gonna do? And I remember thinking, one of the things that got me was, we all already knew, like, they don't hide the fact that Samus has Metroid DNA. They even recap that for you at the beginning of the game, like, so that you know it going in. And I remember just not putting it together, like watching her kill an Emmy and then just touching it. And I'm like, her suit can't do that. She doesn't just touch things. She's not Mega Man. She doesn't just get powers from things after she kills them. What's going on here? And I was like, probably just thinking too much into it. It's probably just an artistic choice, and then they come back to it, and they're like, oh yeah, like, this is happening. And when you're in the fight, first off, one of the things that I want to point out, Ash was talking about the fight with Ravenbeak and how cool it was when Ravenbeak ripped off his wing. For me, it was the moments that Samus had that were the coolest. Like, when she dashes into Ravenbeak and just fires like a full powered blast right into his chest. I was like, oh, come on, let's go. The characterization of Samus in this game is so excellent. Like, it's so on point. She is such a badass in this game. Like, the way you'll see her, like, walking around, who was it? Like, the first boss, I think. The first boss. And instead of, and she just calmly, like, starts charging her arm cannon. It's down, and she's just charging it. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna kill you. Like, she's not worried. There's nothing going on here other than, yep, I know exactly how I'm gonna kill this thing.
Yeah.
And I love that about Samus. Like, she doesn't have to speak. Doesn't have to speak a lot. We get to hear her talk, which is wild. She doesn't have to speak a bunch. She's just there to fulfill the damn mission, and whatever gets in her way is in for a bad time. And I love that about her in this game.
Same. Yeah.
How are you feeling, Daniel?
Specifically about, like, the
twist, or just anything else that, like, caught your characterization, whichever.
Yeah. I love how I think Mercury's theme here really understands, like, Samus as a character and within context of the world. Like even from the very first scene, like, you see her in her movements, in her motions, like, everything is so calm and collected. Like, everything that she does, it's pretty much calculated. Like, this is a seasoned warrior fighting this. Like, I've done this already before. This is something this isn't the last time I'm gonna do it. That sort of whole like mindset on her. And that whole revelation about being DNA like related to the main antagonist, like that's some like space movie Odyssey kind of like deal going on there with everything. But that it's so cool to see how how she can be characterized by different perspectives, and just to see her in this environment and reacting to different like threats essentially. And even when there's no threat, like when you see her with Quiet Robe, like she's so calm. She's literally just sitting down. They're having a chat. They're having a nice little like it's tea time or something. And there's a lot of narrative during that portion. But Yeah. I'm so like it's so impressive to see how much they can do with the character at this point, even after we've seen like you think the story for Samus is more or less like not tied up, but there's a lot more to tell, and just see where they go with it. It's so interesting. And like you mentioned with Adam, I didn't even notice that at the beginning. Like that's the only time you hear her being referred to as Lady, and then like after that entire segment, like she's referred to as Samus by Adam, and just how the way that they speak to you, the way that Adam does speak to you did seem more and more antagonistic as you continued on, because like he continues just to say like your chances for survival against encountering Rivenbeak are basically zero. Even as you continue to collect more and more power-ups within the world. And it's just so cool how they did all that, and just those little connective that little bit of connective tissue that really ties it all together, and makes it seem like, oh man, this was us. This was a well narrated story for what it was.
Yeah, no, I had mentioned before about how one of my favorite continuing narrative threads is that kind of Ghost in the Machine story with Adam, and I love how they played on those expectations here in Metroid Dread, where I too, like the rest of you, I did not pick up on that. I noticed that he called Samus Lady at the beginning, but I didn't pick up on the fact that he didn't after that. So I was thinking that we were talking to Adam for the whole game, to the point where I so did not see that coming. I totally missed the cue there, that for a brief moment in that final cutscene with quote-unquote Adam, or that final conversation, when Adam's like, all you need do is obey me and use your powers the way I tell you to, and everything will be fine. For a brief moment, I was like, oh shit, they've been playing this long game. Adam's been playing, AI Adam's been playing Samus since Fusion. And then, of course, I very quickly realized, no, it was Ravenbeak speaking through Adam and impersonating Adam. But for a brief moment, I was so not tuned into the fact that we had been talking to Ravenbeak the whole time that I was like, oh my god, this AI Adam's really been the big bad all along. Holy shit. But yeah, so they completely pulled the wool over my eyes on that, and hats off to them for that, because I completely did not pick up on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I there's so many wonderful moments to this that just stand out. I love the reveal, like it clicked with me right away what exactly that power has been the entire time, as soon as she took down that last Emmy, which, boy, that was satisfying. That was so after good. Having all that trouble with her just catch its blade and just suck it dry.
That was great.
That was incredible to just play on expectations like that, and have you fight a Chozo warrior instead, a corrupted Chozo warrior. And I think that's the great thing this game does. It plays on expectations of longtime fans. It messes with them, but not in any like major way. It just shifts things, and what you expect doesn't quite happen all the time. Like the first time playing, it felt like it took forever to get the morph ball, but I replayed it and I had it within a half hour. It's like, oh, okay, it really wasn't that far away. It just felt that long because I'm, taking my time and exploring a bit more, and it's a little tougher, but you really do feel it's not being there at the start, and kind of how you miss it, and the fact that. How do I put this? I like it when games challenge you based on your own skill set. We kind of got that with the SAX and Fusion. We really get that with the Chozo Warriors and the final boss with Ravenbeak, where it's basically like, yeah, he's just Samus. He has her abilities. Plus, he's actually able to use this Omega cannon that you've only been able to use once to take out the Emmys, and that's about it. And it feels kind of amazing. Also, I gotta ask, was I the only one that didn't realize I could just hold down the fire button in the final sequence when you're escaping as Metroid Samus and just lay waste to everything? Because I was jamming the button.
Oh, no, I figured
I was jamming it too. I didn't hold it down.
That's funny. I figured out about halfway through that end sequence that you could hold it down. It took me not right away.
Yeah, I was about 2/3 through.
I was like trying everything to make. One thing about like setting expectations, man, I really wish that, like, given the entire game that I in its full package now, I really wish I didn't learn about Kraid beforehand. Like, like the entire
that
build
introduction to Kraid is perfect.
The whole build up, like you hear him in the background, and just, oh my god, that was so cool.
I wish they had gone even
fact-
for just a little, like even one little still image, maybe somewhat explaining how that happened. Because it almost just felt like he was there just for a gotcha. Whoa, isn't that cool? Here's this boss from Super Metroid that you probably remember, or other Metroid games too. But it didn't seem like there was really any narratively logical reason that he was there. Did they reconstruct him? Did they?
The best you get is one of the Chozo archives showing them basically capturing
Yeah.
him, but they don't say how he survived or anything like that. But to be fair, they've never explained how Ridley survives.
True.
So
and I will say that was a
Yeah.
nice surprise here. I'm glad they didn't contrive a reason for Ridley to somehow be around like Kraid. Narratively, Ridley is dead, right? So it's cool that they didn't contrive a reason to bring him back yet again. I actually like that they stuck to their guns and didn't just say, let's bring everyone back just for the hell of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like Ridley would have felt a little too fan servicey.
Yeah, agreed. I totally agree with what you
absolutely.
said.
I mean, we already got the central units for some mother. Man, there's a lot of things that are like Mother Brain in this universe between Metroid Prime 3 and
I
now
know.
Dread. We
The
got the
Aurora
Aurora
units.
units, we got the central units, and just everything that apparently goes back to Mother
Even
Brain.
the little ring projectiles that are fired at you in the central unit battle rooms. Yeah, that's straight out of the Mother Brain boss fight, and I love that.
Yeah, shooting you with Cheerios.
Yeah,
Just like in the
exactly.
original.
Yeah.
That eye and brain is so grotesque to look at. It's like, oh,
really
it's too organic in this area. Like,
One thing that I noticed, and I agree with you about how the game plays on your expectations, Derek. I like that example with the morph ball is perfect. It made me miss and appreciate the morph ball for maybe the first time ever, which I loved. I was like, man, I really, really want the morph ball, and I've never felt that way really before because you get it right away. In most other Metroid games, but I did have some issues with one of the reasons that it didn't get pushed into a pure bliss for me until the end was because I did have some pacing issues with the game, and I thought there were a couple of instances in which the order that you gain power-ups in was a little weird. Like, you go through so much of the game with no missile upgrades, and then you get the super missile and ice missile, like, right next to each other. And then the diffusion missiles not too long after that. And it just felt like maybe certain things about the way you gain some power-ups maybe should have been shifted a little bit. But, that's ultimately a minor complaint in what is an otherwise, really just fantastic game. But I will say, and this probably is more down to how I chose to play the game. I basically got 100% and explored everything before finishing the game, and that's on me. But I didn't love the backtracking. Not that you shouldn't have to backtrack. I shouldn't say I didn't love the backtracking. I didn't love the lack of convenient fast travel. The teleporters...
Well,
didn't do it for me.
And you played yourself, Ash, because I'll tell you one thing that you probably didn't realize. If you, and I talked with a few people on Twitter about this when I discovered it going to do cleanup because, I had to get the review done. I could not go for 100% because some of those are really freaking tricky.
Yeah.
But I ended with about 61% items. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go through and collect everything so I can get all the Chozo archives that unlock. And when I next went to a teleporter, I all of a sudden had the thing come up. It's like all teleporters connected. So turns out that if you go fight Ravenbeak, lose and go back, or just even that, all the teleporters will be connected and it makes it fast travel way
That's
easier.
ridiculous. Okay. That I don't even know if that should be considered to be on the player. I feel like maybe as soon as you discover all the teleporters, or at least the game should tell you, I don't know, there should be some sort of messaging that, hey, next time you come back, these teleporters will be connected. I just feel like there's no way for players like me who, would love to have that convenience. There's no way for us to know, oh, let's go fight the final boss, lose, then come back, and these teleporters will all be connected. That's a little, don't love that. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not understanding something. I thought all the teleporters were connected, like without fighting Ravenbeak.
Well,
I don't know.
There's just the one way.
Maybe they did. I don't know. I've saw some people say it's like maybe to the final area, maybe to Ravenbeak. I don't know. Something about it triggers. That all of a sudden you can
I don't know what
it.
the trigger is because the only time all the times I used the teleporters, it was only from color to color, red to red, blue to blue, cyan to cyan. It was never I could go anywhere I wanted, and it just made navigating the world take a little longer than I would like it to sometimes.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. I'm misremembering that. I played through, like, I blazed through the game just because I wanted to see the story. And I'm glad I did that, because if it had been spoiled for me, I would have been pissed.
Same.
But
Same.
yeah, you're right. It is color to color until Ravenbeak, it looks like, or until you get them all.
I think
Somewhere around
the
there.
idea might be like if you fight Ravenbeak and you realize you're like you need more energy tanks, you need more expansions, you can go back and it's just there for you, ready to go, so you can fast travel wherever you need to.
Sure. Yeah, I wish there was another way that had been kind of unlocked or messaged to players who don't necessarily, who are enjoying exploring and want to get everything they can. But I can see the other side too, for sure. And maybe there was a prompt I missed. It's always possible there's a prompt I missed, and I just...
I don't remember a prompt, so I don't think
Right.
you missed it. I honestly
Right.
don't. That said, 60 fighting Ravenbeak at 61%. That definitely questioned your skills.
I'm sure.
You beat him in 5 tries. It took me an hour.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
to
no, it's
beat him.
different when I had the benefit of all the power-ups and everything. And yeah, I think that's why it only took me, I think it was 4 or 5. But yeah, no, I definitely had an easier time of it because I had everything.
So let's talk. We talked about the morph ball coming back and being later and all that. My absolute favorite new ability that Samus gets in this is I forget the name of it, but the multi-missile.
The diffusion or the storm
That thing
missiles.
is-
Storm missiles.
Yeah.
Storm missiles. That thing is amazing against
Yep.
bosses and when you finally take on the other Chozo warriors. Because holy crap, that is satisfying.
I was going to say the same thing.
Man.
It's one of my favorite might be my favorite new weapon that she gets in this game.
That's interesting. I didn't use it that much. I like it, but I didn't use it that much. I didn't, specifically against the Chozos, I never used it. What I did abuse the hell out of in those fights was the flash shift.
Flash shift. I think that's the one I might enjoy more as
yeah,
well.
flash shift
That's
is
true.
also really good.
Yeah.
Those two in tandem work so well and make you
I
feel,
love the
kind of
flash shift.
unstoppable.
Like, yeah. I've said before that I love a good dash. I love a good air dash. Like, that's one of the most satisfying moves you can have in a game like this is an air dash or just a dash move in general. And you know when a game gets the feel of a dash right. And this is an example of a game getting it perfectly right. I love the phase shift. It's just so cool looking and it feels good to pull off.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels good. You could pass through projectiles with it, which is something that I feel like a lot of modern Metroidvanias have. I'm pretty sure Hollow Knight has a very similar ability to the flash shift. But either way, the way it works in Dread is like a top tier implementation of this type of mechanic. I absolutely love that you can chain 3 of them together too. I would often like attack the Chozo warriors, and then when I saw them getting ready to like charge at me with that red attack that seems very difficult to get around, I would just have Samus jump up in the air and then flash shift all the way across the screen and then just keep laying missiles into them from a distance, and I would just never let them get close. It was incredibly satisfying to use.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. Sorry, go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to say, when you get that a skill set to just chain the missiles and the phase shift together, you do feel pretty unstoppable, and it feels necessary a lot of times, especially against Ravenbeak, because my God,
Right.
Yeah.
You need everything for fighting Ravenbeak. You need to it really does test you on all the abilities that you've had so far just in that one boss fight.
I do.
You know what I was surprised about though? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
So first thing I want to mention, because we're talking about new power-ups, and I love the flash shift and I love the new missile power-up, but the Shine Spark implementation in this game is so good.
Yep.
Like,
Shine
it
Spark is
feels
crazy.
better than Super Metroid. But related to that, what I was really kind of surprised by, I don't know if y'all did this, but the minute I got the power bomb, the first thing I tried to do was execute a crystal flash. And I was so sad that you can't do it in Dread.
That's too bad.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the Crystal Flash was only in Super because it wasn't in Fusion either.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
I
It
didn't
wasn't
think about that.
in Fusion. I keep hoping it'll come back. Like that was kind of like I remember like as a kid playing Super Metroid and reading about the Crystal Flash in EGM and being like, you got me once with Shenlong. This isn't real.
Yeah.
and then like, being like, well, it wouldn't hurt to try. This one's way easier to pull off. And so I tried it, and the first time I saw Samus like float into the air and like, come out of her suit, I was like, I can't believe this actually exists. So I was just hopeful for like, because Dread gets so many other elements of Super Metroid down perfectly that I was like, it's got to be there. It's got to be. And I was kind of surprised that it wasn't. But
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't take away from the game. It just would have been really cool to see that added in.
I agree. I mean, at least the ball spark is there. That's super cool to pull off too. That feels really in there. Some of the puzzles specifically anchored around the ball spark are really satisfying when you figure them out. And just the Shine Spark puzzles in general, there are a few really tricky ones that you have to deal with if you want to get 100%. But they're so satisfying to pull off because of the execution they require. It's I agree. The Shine Spark feels better here than I think it has ever felt in any other Metroid game, and it just feels so good to pull off. And completely agree. Kind of going back to the pacing issue I mentioned earlier, though, I mentioned some other power-ups I thought that you got in kind of a weird way, and not only the missiles, but I was thinking the bombs too. Like you go the whole game with just your basic bomb, and at the very end they kind of sneak in the cross bomb and power bomb right next to one another, and I just feel like maybe the cross bomb should have come a little earlier. Like there's so many puzzles you come by that you clearly need something you don't have in ball form to get the power-ups, and it's just some of the pacing. As good as it was in some ways, it felt a little bit off to me in terms of the way power-ups are doled out. But, as I said, it is a relatively minor complaint in the grand scheme of everything else Dread gets so incredibly right. The other thing, though, I wanted to ask is, did anyone else here feel as though you fight those Chozo warriors and then the X-Parasite Chozo warriors a little bit too much? I feel like they reused that fight just slightly. Maybe once or twice too many times.
To some degree, but I always found them fun, so I never minded.
Yeah, they are
fun. I never got tired of the central units or the Chozo warriors.
Sure.
And I'll be honest, the X-Parasites being unleashed was probably one of my favorite moments in the game because, having doing the analysis, I'm like, well, this must be faked and whatnot. It's just not a real because the X-Parasites are gone, and then have the revelation that no, they're still here. They're just locked up. And to see that scene of them just flying all around and kind of unleashed and how it shifts to a more fusion-like gameplay style. After that, it's like, that is such a cool shift in how things work in this game and really emphasizes the danger of the X. It also made me realize, like, well, this planet's dead.
Yeah, seriously. And
there is no way this planet was surviving Samus after that happened.
And they did not shy away from the visual horror or the visual grossness of what the X-Parasites do to a host. Like the way, like when the X-Parasite infects Ravenbeak at the end, the way his face literally like splits open. I'm like, man, that's gross, but it's so good too. They didn't shy away from that at all. They went full on visual horror with these X-Parasites, and I just love the way you see the manners in which they grotesquely transform their hosts, and it's all squicky and all the sound effects when their faces are coming apart. It's perfectly done. I love it.
It also emphasizes just how good the power suit is for Samus because, she did get infected by the X and fusion, but she was able to live and not get morphed like the others did, for long enough that they were able to save her and get that Metroid cure. And it's a good attention to detail that the reason Ravenbeak gets possessed so quickly is that his helmet comes off.
Right.
He's exposed. Right. So it's a good touch.
It is really,
It was definitely cool to see like the X-Parasites kind of just, in the back half of the game become just as dangerous as they were in Fusion. I really liked that aspect of it. Suddenly you no longer ran into normal enemies. Everything was an X-Parasite, and I thought that was really cool. Really cool touch, especially when you would kill an enemy and then would fail to grab the X-Parasite and it would change into a different enemy after that. I had that happen to me a few times, and I thought that was a really cool touch. Real quick, going back to power-ups for a sec, because none of us talked about it. I feel like the one power-up that maybe they dropped the ball with a little bit was the spider magnet. I thought it was interesting, but I don't think it ever really added anything beyond like giving you spots to hide from enemies. But
Sure.
I feel like it was one of the less interesting power-ups that they had, because almost every place, especially once you have the screw attack, it feels kind of useless.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely get that, but it's also what you just said about it is also applies to the spider magnet for the morph ball that you got in
Oh, the
Metroid
spider
2,
ball.
where you just slowly spider ball. Thank you. Where you just slowly went against the wall, but you're also completely defenseless. So you get hit and you get knocked off, and it sucks. At least with this new spider magnet, you can defend, you
yourself.
can counter, you can shoot, and that's I think the advantage there. Sure, it's not exciting. You don't get to use it too often, but it was an improvement overall.
Yeah, I mean, but I see where
an
Steve's
improvement
coming
over the
from.
spider ball for sure.
I think it's meant to just kind of be an early game traversal mechanic that basically lets you expand your range of exploration, but isn't necessarily the most fun or interesting power up to use. I mean, and to be fair, that's you could say that to a degree of every Metroid game. Once you get the screw attack, all of your other exploration abilities are basically rendered moot. Not in every case, obviously you need the morph ball in specific cases, but once you get the screw attack, generally a 2D Metroid game completely opens up to you, irrespective of whatever other traversal abilities you got prior to that. But I do agree, the
that's
spider
true.
magnet's kind of like, it serves its purpose earlier in the game, but after that, it's not that interesting. Excuse me. Although I will say, one thing that surprised me is I didn't think I liked the way the Grapple Beam was implemented at first. And it's funny, I have to call it the Grappling Beam because that's what it was called in Super Metroid, and that's what I've always been used to it being called. But the Grapple Beam, as it's called here in Dread, I didn't think I liked the way it felt, but then I realized that just how long it can extend. And you can, I was watching a speed run the other day of like a world record, any percent. This guy beats it in like an hour and 16 minutes. It's ridiculous. And some of that is Grapple Beam traversal mechanics, where you can pull yourself through the environment, even if what you're attaching to is off screen. The Grapple Beam will actually link to it, and so you could do all this cool Grapple Beam tech, just swinging yourself through the environment and latching onto things off screen. It's actually really satisfying to use, even though I didn't think I liked it at first.
Yeah, I noticed that pretty quickly is just how long it was. But go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just gonna say the grapple beam. Yeah, it was the one thing for me that later in the game made the spider magnet kind of fun to use, because you could be on a wall and you could grapple to another spider magnet surface and just go between them. And yeah, there's like seemingly almost no limit to its range. It's really impressive how well that works in this game.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing we haven't actually talked about too much, which is kind of surprising because it's kind of all over the advertisements, but the Emmy, they are a major focus of this. And I have seen the complaints that Emmy kind of lose their fear factor and kind of get old and just more of annoying after a while, which I think is sort of the inevitable thing that happens with these types of enemies. That people had the same complaint about the alien in Alien Isolation. It's like, all right, you killed me, I get it, let me move on. I think people have that reaction. That said, I still greatly enjoyed them and loved how they implemented the different powers into their equipment, which made them each feel different to fight and set up so you can actually take them out. But what did you think of the Emmy, Daniel?
Yeah, I think at first, when you first encounter the Emmy, like it's obviously like a tutorial Emmy. They're very slow, and you're learning to run away from them, and you learn how to destroy them as well. I see Steve has his out as well. And then that's how this essentially how you learn about the Omega Beam and how to use that. And then the next one is like the actual one where you're actually running away in actual fear. I think everyone's first encounter with the Emmy is, oh my god, I need to get away from this. It's crawling at me in a very unsettling manner, and I need to escape like ASAP. And I think because there are certain ones in certain areas that just it killed me a lot. I think the one that had the very speedy one, I think it was like maybe the fourth Emmy or so. Like that one kept getting me, and there was a certain point where I was like, all right, I know I can't like escape this right now, and just the constant going back and forth with certain ones was I guess like I think it had run its course by the end, and by the seventh enemy, the one that just destroyed itself, or that destroyed it, the one that Samus just basically siphoned off and killed right away, was very like cathartic to see that happen at that point, because you're so tired of getting chased down and destroyed by these things. But by the end, yeah, that was something that I think I don't know, man. There's certain parts of it that I do really like about it, that it does instill the dread in Metroid Dread, like how when you're in those rooms, there's like a bit of a static overlay. You see, it's kind of like silhouetted into like a vignette. It has that kind of horror element to it. That really does seem effective towards the beginning, but as time went on, I think it kind of lost its effect as you went on. There are probably some ways that they could have implemented that a little bit better, but I definitely do like how, like, when you have the beam, just overcoming them, it always feels pretty gratifying.
Yeah, I definitely, for me, I think one of my relative low points of the game did indeed come a little bit later, when I basically hit a wall with one of the Emmy. I largely didn't have too much trouble with the Emmy, but one of them later in the game, I think it's the purple one. I think you get the wave beam from them.
That one detects you everywhere.
It detects you everywhere, and the environment you have to go through to avoid it is full of water before you have the gravity suit. And that was kind of where I started learning about the Grapple Beam and how that can pull you forward and give you some momentum in the water, give you a little speed and velocity before you have the gravity suit. And but I died on that one so many times. Like most Emmys, I either didn't get killed by, or I maybe only a couple of times. But it was either the purple one or the ice blue one that I just kept dying. And it felt like I was hitting my head against a wall. And I was like, okay, this has gone from being, cool and creepy to just annoying, and I just want to move on. But that was really the only wall I hit in terms of the difficulty of the game. I never really had any trouble with too many of the bosses or anything like that. It was really always the Emmy most of the time that were killing me, and really those two specific ones. So yeah, like the ice blue and purple Emmy, I was kind of getting tired of the whole mechanic by then, but I still respect what they were trying to do, and I would say they largely succeeded. But there are definitely some pain points later on where you just feel like, okay, just let me move on. Come on, How?
So,
what about you,
go ahead,
Steve?
for me, the Emmy were one of my favorite things about the game all the way through.
Yeah.
My only complaint about the Emmy is that I would have preferred that they were more akin to like Mr. X in Resident Evil, and they would just, as long as they were alive and active, they had the ability to show up anywhere. And that probably runs really counter to how a lot of people feel about it, but I feel like the encounters themselves were really fun to play. And I liked that it was incredibly difficult to counter them, because when you finally did pull off a counter, it always felt like this amazing achievement that you managed to one-up the Emmy and get the hell away from it. And because they're so incredibly difficult, the kind of feeling of accomplishment that I got from killing them was kind of heightened over like a regular boss battle or something, because I had to meet all these requirements to do it. I feel like the Emmy zones, though, kind of hamper the fear factor that comes along with them, because I know, like, okay, as long as I exit this door, I'm good. And then I can regroup and go back in and come on with a different plan. Whereas if they just, busted through a wall or dropped from the ceiling somewhere, right, I'd be like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And I know that a lot of people probably don't want that, like, overwhelming sense of fear. But I think it could have added something to the game if they weren't restricted just to their zones. Because by the end of it, you do kind of have a familiarity and sense of comfort with how these encounters function. And you're like, all right, I'm going to go into the Emmy zone. I'm going to hunt around for the weird brain thing. I'm going to get that. And then I'm going to smoke this damn Emmy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was at the end. I'm like, I know what I got to do. I'm going to go get the Omega Cannon, and then I'm going to kill you. Like, I'm not worried about it. And if you grab me, I'm probably going to get killed, but then I'll just come back and try again. Whereas I think if I was in the mindset of like, okay, I'm trying to figure out where to go, I'm trying to figure out what to do, and then an Emmy just came out of nowhere, I think that probably would not would not have the same, like I wouldn't have that same level of comfort later in the game. I'd still be like, oh God, oh God, oh God, I need to move. I need to, I'm not ready for you right now.
I think it's a question of playability at that point, because yes, it would absolutely be much more freaky if it was like Mr. X and was constantly chasing you and you didn't really feel safe ever. But then that kind of changes the way Metroid is. You don't get those breathers to kind of explore. And I think it would be like, people have already said that Metroid Dread's kind of newcomer hostile, or at least, it doesn't accommodate people who maybe not get past the high difficulty of Dread. And I think that would enhance that even more. Plus, you finding these Emmy kind of old hat and not really something to worry about does kind of figure in with Samus's whole MO. It's like, oh, I got these guys down now. They're freaking dead. They're no big deal. They're just sort of annoyance now. I can sort of see that aspect of it. But that said, I can totally see wanting to have that, like, I want to feel dread the entire time. I want to make it all uncomfortable. But I think that the way they did it was sort of to strike a balance, because that way you have sort of the more classic Metroid gameplay while also having this new, more enhanced SAX chasing.
Absolutely.
Mechanics.
I would love it personally if they introduced like a DLC very hard mode or something that made that change. Like, hey, now the Emmys just show up wherever. Good luck. I would definitely play that. But I agree with you, Derrick, that they did this for like a level of gameplay balance, because Metroid games traditionally aren't very difficult. Like they really aren't like super difficult games. They're usually incredibly well crafted and well balanced, but I wouldn't say that they lean on like the more difficult end of the spectrum. So this does keep in line with traditional, Metroid, and it does, like you mentioned, play into the whole power fantasy that exists at the core of Metroid games, right? The more you progress, the stronger you become, the less challenging enemies are. And I do think that by the end, most players will probably feel like, oh yeah, it's another Emmy. I'm gonna do what I always do.
Yeah. Excuse me. Completely agree. And that's one thing this game gets completely right, is how the God, excuse me, sorry. Just the progression of your power level, right? Like when you first arrive on planet ZDR, the same thing that happens every time Samus gets, her power stripped from her. They call it was it ability amnesia or physical amnesia in this game, whatever. But, everything feels genuinely dangerous and threatening and hostile when you're just starting out. Enemies do the typically high amount of damage that they do in Metroid games. But then you start getting a few energy tanks, you start getting a few power-ups, and it starts feeling a little bit more even. But then by the end of the game, you're just running through and blasting everything with zero effort, because Samus is just so massively stronger than anything else that she's fighting, until, of course, the final boss. But this game gets that progression of your power level, the power fantasy, and just making you feel more powerful with each new upgrade. That really nails that aspect of Metroid really, really well, in my opinion. And like Steve was saying, by the end of the game, you're likely just ready to deal with even Emmys. They're just like, okay, here we go. Got to get the Omega Cannon, do all that. I did enjoy the Omega Cannon mechanic in the sense that I love the tension of having to, not only shoot the Omega Blaster to peel off its, protective plating, but also charge the cannon as it's stalking you, as it's approaching you with that creepy stalking animation it has. I love that you have to stand your ground and fire on it as it's approaching you. I think that's a really cool, I like the way that that's how you have to kill them. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
absolutely agreed.
But I think it was great. Great. I mean, more than great. We said pure bliss, right?
Yeah,
across the board.
Like, how often does everybody on a channel say, yes, this game is pure bliss and is simply amazing and should be played if possible? That really says something about what was crafted here. And I think for the most part, that kind of wraps up everything we have to say, unless you guys have any points you wanted to bring up before we end this off. I
did have one question I wanted to ask you, Derrick. I wanted to put you on the spot, if you don't mind. So I don't know yet personally. I don't know if Metroid Dread is my game of the year. It's going to be up there for sure. But, what we have said so far, and I think you and I have agreed on this, and I think Steve as well, so far our game of the year probably has been Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. How do you feel now after having played Metroid Dread? Do you think Metroid Dread has supplanted it? as your game of the year, or are you still feeling Ratchet right now? Like, where are you standing on this?
I think I'm leaning towards Dread.
Okay, cool.
I'm leaning towards Dread right now. Like Rift Apart is excellent. It really does feel next gen in what it achieves, the way it uses its haptic feedbacks, and it just really comes together. But at the end of the day, this is still Ratchet, and it doesn't really change up its gameplays too often. It's just heightened to a fine sheen. And you can almost say the same thing about Metroid Dread, but there's shifts in how much it's improved itself and just feels, again, excellent to play. And yeah, it's a tight, short experience that you can just pick up, and once you know what you're doing, get through that game relatively quickly and have a fantastic time. And you kind of like, the rewards for getting 100% aren't great.
Yeah.
They get some artwork that clears out some things, but they're not as impactful as what they were in Samus Returns. That said, it's one of those things where you do it just because it's fun to do. It's fun to play. You just want to keep playing it more. And I think that's what has put Metroid Dread just slightly above Rift Apart for me.
Gotcha. Well, it'll be an interesting discussion to have when we get to our Game of the Year discussions, which won't be too far from now, since considering it's already early November. You did mention haptics
That's
there,
insane.
and that's something that I wish Dread did a little bit more of. But I will say something about the Morph Ball launchers, the feedback you got specifically from the Morph Ball launchers just felt so satisfying, like you were popping bubble wrap or something. It's just that little click that you could, I don't know, it just felt really good to me. I really like those little Morph Ball launchers. They felt great to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Daniel and Steve? Anything else you wanted to mention before we end this off?
Overall, I love the design and aesthetic. Unfortunately, this probably has one of the more weaker soundtracks of a Metroid game.
Yeah, I was going to mention
that's
that.
true.
There's just not very many songs that I could think of that stick out as much as, like, for example, Super Metroid, of course, which is like one of the peaks of the series for soundtracks. But that aside, like everything else with sound design, like whenever you receive like any kind of power up, that whole that sound effect, it just sounds so satisfying for some reason. Like you feel Samus getting equipped with all these other like little assets and such. But man, like I guess the only other thing is, like, at the time of this recording, I think you all might have seen the very detailed model for Samus in her Zero suit for Dread. And like, I don't know, that's really detailed for just a game over sequence where she explodes out of her suit. Man, what if they did something that was akin to like Zero's Missions extra episode for a DLC, and it's more like maybe there's one more Emmy and you have to like kind of sneak around it that way, and it's more like what Steve was saying about how it like constantly kind of slowly stalks you throughout the entirety of this one section or something like that. I don't know. It feels like something that they could probably do with that asset if they wanted to, but that's just me spitballing. Otherwise, love the game, of course. One of the best games this year.
I actually love that idea, though. I love the idea of DLC that's kind of like a Zero Mission style Zero Suit Samus mission where she's only in her Zero Suit. Like, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It could be pretty cool. I think Dread is going to be a game that's talked about for quite some time. I hope that there's more coming for it. It absolutely deserves some kind of DLC or some kind of add-on, but as a standalone, similar to Super Metroid, I think it's a fantastic game. There's an argument to be made for it being the best, not just 2D Metroid, but the best Metroid ever. And I think that alone should tell you that it's this is one of the few games, because I try to stay away from recommending people buy a console for a single game. But Dread is a game that you absolutely should pick up a Switch for. This is if Breath of the Wild and Odyssey and all of that somehow didn't sell you on a Switch, Dread is definitely a game worth considering picking it up for. So that's how good it is in my opinion. I very seldom tell people to do that, so that's what I would have to say.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a
good.
system seller. If you're into this kind of game and into the kind of genre that Metroid Dread really encapsulates, that I could easily see recommending a Switch for this game.
Yeah, it looks fantastic on OLED if you have one, with all the pure blacks that this game has,
Yeah.
Check out. I do not have an
right.
OLED.
I
I'm
know.
jealous.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that covers it for our Metroid Dread spoiler discussion. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming. But even just subscribing to the channel, ringing that bell helps us a ton. So until next time, until next discussion, bye.